Welcome everyone to the Spirit and Bone podcast. We have the magnificent, the silly, the superb, the curious, the creative Marya Stark, known as a bardic song catcher, vocalist, multi-instrumentalist, and multimedia enchantress. She's someone that I have chosen because her relationship to ritual and the arts and creative cultivation runs deep and strong, and the wisdom I know that she has to bestow upon you, the listeners, and all those that are touched by her music and her words and her ways will bring such goodness. So without further ado, we're going to just start with a little grounding meditation, get us into the groove before we get into sharing what's alive and what's needed. So I just invite us to just bring our awareness to that sweet breath, that breath in our body and our bones, that pulse of life, that reciprocity that we are giving and receiving throughout each day. And as we give and receive life, as we give and receive our intentions and our thoughts, I want to bring our awareness to the great beneath. When I talk of the great beneath, I think of the stones, I think of the landscape, the mycelial network, the moss, the Gary Oaks here. I think of the water that is coursing from Rattlesnake Creek, where Marya is, touching the landscape, bringing moist hydration to the parched, dry earth. And so, dear great beneath, I ask that your wisdom hold us, that you be a foundation for this conversation, that you hold us and our words, that you be a returning place. Blessed be, welcome great beneath, be with us, hold us today. And as there is a great beneath, so do we stretch beyond the tops of our heads and soar above the clouds. And we know that above us is a great beyond. Not only is it the clouds and the ozone layer, but it's that starry night sky, that wonder, that expansive horizon. So in our council today, I welcome that inspiration from the great beyond. Help us stretch our ideas, our words. Help us access information and guidance that is being desired to sip through this conversation into the hearts and minds of those that find this sweet little podcast. Welcome, Great Beyond. Be with us. Help us have an eagle eyes perspective of that which needs to be shared today. Welcome. And as we stretch and soar to that great landscape, that horizon of beyond and beyond, we bring our awareness back down to that body, to that fulcrum point, that living, pulsing point that is between the great beneath and the great beyond. And I invite you, if it feels right to you, to put your hand somewhere on your body. And feeling the textures beneath your fingertips, feeling the warmth of that beating life. And I welcome the great within. I ask that the wisdom, the stories, the dreams that are near and dear to you that wish to be shared today, Marya, come forth effortlessly, that you can trust in what your body is ready to share and receive from this session today.
Thank you.
Welcome, great within. And to surround it all, I surround us with this big, beautiful, let's say a golden, why not we just throw a golden dragon in here just to soar, meet you where you are, circumnavigate the land all the way to where I am on the Salish, by the Salish Sea, back to the sweet Yuba River to help our conversation meet us and our bodies. So be it. Now we can begin. So Marya, one thing I've been really wanting to pick your words on and your heart on is how you integrate the cultivation of the creative muse inside of you and externally through ritual. Just to start there.
Just to start, well, it's a beautiful inquiry. And I think, my first impulse is to define ritual. Like, how are we defining ritual? What is a I consider in this moment ritual to be actions that bring forth congruence. So I'm applying my body, my speech, my mind all towards one aim in a deliberate and dedicated way in order to bring congruence for prayer. And I'm doing something that's repetitive. I'm doing something that's calling to many levels of experience into a focal point. So how do I do that in relationship to my creative process? A lot of different ways. A lot of different ways. And I think the reason I love ritual, or what I call like dedicated actions that bring congruence, is because I've learned that when you align body, speech, and mind in any way, you become really potent. Which is why any kind of daily ritual or weekly ritual or monthly ritual or cycle ritual can be really helpful touch point towards understanding, assimilating, integrating the greater cycles of our lives. And as an artist, I make art in response to my insights as the greater cycles that I'm going through, not only just my personal psyche, my personal relationship and stories, but also to my understanding of my relationship to the collective story that's unfolding. And so when I'm involved with ritual to bring a moment that I get to have a reflection, a gratitude, an anchor point with the bigger song that's happening. So some of the ways that I do that with creative process, well, every creative process asks and beckons for different kinds of rituals, different kinds of repetitive pieces. I think there's the ritual of making space for recording. I think that's the biggest place that I have really specific kinds of rituals. Well, I have to set the time, like actually making a time and setting up the gear, like setting up the gear becomes this signal flow establishment. Okay, I'm setting it up. And then there's like the mundane kind of rituals that are creating the opportunity to capture a moment. But beyond that, the mundane kind of rituals, when I go to work on a bigger body of work, maybe I've had a dream or an insight about something that I'm aspiring to convey in a body of work. I will do, like, for example, I have a body of work that I'm going to be releasing a little bit later this year in the spring. And it is a ritual, it is a body of work that's really connected to the water spirits. And so for many years, I had a vision, like a dream, like a very strong lucid dream about this particular connection to the water spirits. And for many years, I would go to different waterfalls and I would sing at the different waterfalls to relate to those water spirits. And sometimes I would record those. And so I found a language over years that felt like, oh, this is the language of my communication with the water spirits, how we're relating together to rejoice in the cycles of water. Then when it came to starting to really record some of the songs that were part of that, I dedicated a whole week to it, where it's like, okay, I brought my friend over. We're going to have a week and we're going to just rock in these intuitive flows. We're going to go hang out by the water. We're going to make offerings to the water spirits. to feed them, and so that we're in a reciprocal relationship of feeding one another. And I found that that ritual started to become really important, that like anytime I started to feel like a low energy about the project, like, oh, if I would actually go back to the water spirits and like, okay, it's time to feed you some milk, or, you know, and there would be all
Mm.
this energy and nectar again, like, oh yeah, it's relational. And so that became a really important ritual, and continues to be. Like anytime actually now that I feel thin or sad in my creative flow, I'm like, oh, maybe it's time to go feed the river. Like really
Get
go
it?
with the beings there, the wonderful river fae. Um, and then those kinds of rituals started to feed. And then as different practices would come, like, oh, to capture video that was connected to this, oh, to capture these kinds of things, then it became group field dynamics. Well, what kind of rituals are we dropping in to really pray about the waters of our body, pray to our ancestral waters, bringing in voice as a way to just tone into a moment of reflection and attunement to the vision and the prayer. Again, voice is such a powerful way to bring congruence of body, speech, and mind, because
Mm-hmm.
requires the body be connected to the sound, be connected to the mental image, and they're all focused then now again on the objective or the prayer intention or what we're bringing attention to. And so I find that those are some examples of how I've incorporated ritual in this, you know, again, just in this particular body of work that I'm talking about that's coming out in the spring. And so now it's every time I'm because I'm kind of in the gestation of it, anytime I'm around anything having to do with water, I'm engaged on some level, on a magical level or on a ritual level of just like even
Mm-hmm.
thinking about it. And it's just even that extra thought. It's like that extra attention becomes a ritual, just an extra moment of like, oh, I'm going to disconnect from the habitual kind of rabbit mind. It's just like, oh, the monkey, you know, it's just like da da da, and just like even a moment. Oh yeah, what am I doing? Oh, the water. Oh, the sound that connects to the water. Oh, the water fade. Like even just like the ritual moments can become so succinct and quick. Um, and they like build upon all of these previous moments where there was more like elaborate, you know,
Mm.
adventure and
Yeah.
elaborate, what like vision quest kind of energy, where it's like, oh, missions, you know, the missions are less necessary at this phase. It's just like, oh, I attune to, and I'm in the current of the previous missions as they continue to flow through um, to follow through with the full birthing of the process.
Ooh, love it. It's inspiring me of something I had wanted to ask you about in relation to when you're creating this devotional practice to a specific. I know that I love that you work also with colors and like, or like when you have a muse that is all encompassing you, and clearly your body of work is influenced by that. I'm curious how you kind of allocate space for that relationship in a way that also can differentiate between your own like human Marya and like because that's something I'm exploring with working with the unseen world, is this dynamic of like sometimes they're really demanding and they just want to be, they're in our dreams and our thoughts, and it's like this process of creating and allocating space for the current wisdom that's moving through. And I'm curious if there's any suggestions that you might have for people that are feeling enraptured with an idea or a vision or a muse, but are also needing to like take that away, you know, create space for that is not engulfing all of their basic functioning capacity.
I mean, it's an interesting dialogue. You know, that's an interesting question, because I definitely have had those particular energies that when they're on their ride, like I'm being taken on a ride, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
I associate those rides with some kind of Kundalini process where it was like, oh, I'm actually having an energetic experience of more energy coming into my being and my whole system uh, coming online with new information. Potentially, I've just gone through a big shadow death, like ego
Yeah.
death. And so now there's all of this grief happen. And so now there's all this more vitality. And then all that's streaming with all of these bigger Maha energies. And so there's a part of me that just likes to make some space for that to happen
Mm-hmm.
without having to control it, because um, it has it that has its place in time. Now, what you're asking is like, well, what if it's just like it's too much, it's gone over the way. I think that there are some really beautiful grounding places to like put it. So we're not being ridden by these multidimensional energies that are like, you're an open vessel, do my bidding. You're like, come on, like I gotta like do some other shit, you know?
I need to remember to eat.
Yeah, I think like anytime I associate that kind of windy state, like I'm not eating, I'm not sleeping as like a vata, like when we think about um Vedic medicine, Ayurvedic
Yeah.
medicine, my first thought is just like, oh, it's like a little bit of vata derangement, which deranged vata can be a very visionary, magical state. You're like, wow, so many things. And so my first thought is just like, yeah, manage your vata, like go take a lot of baths and a lot of oils and like
Mm.
do the do the appropriate body care to manage the state dysregulation, because I think we can get inspired without having to go into to living in dysregulated states. And I think that so it's like if you manage your dosha, manage your like just learn about how you get dysregulated and do the appropriate methods to be with that, because being inside of sustainable energetics with creative energy, that creative energy is flow state energy. It is kundalini in the winds. And if our side channels get choked up, then the winds can get wonky and we can get deranged. And so I'd say whatever you can do
Love
to
it.
be with the ways that you chronically get imbalanced in general. And sometimes we can't control it because things are just having their assimilation practice. But if I'm vata deranged, I take hot baths and I do a lot of oil treatment. And another piece that I've done a lot with the wild windy like energies is I actually will go into a space of like asking like, hey, these energies are really awesome, and like thank you for the gifts of inspiration and vision, and let's renegotiate energy boundaries. And I might actually visualize
Mm.
that whatever energy is coming into me that doesn't feel necessarily like my human self, it's like some aspect of my higher self, but that's in like a second person kind of energetic of a multidimensional muse kind of energy, or like a fetch from like a one of these like big fetches that are looking for different portals to come through and do their bidding. You're like, okay, you're cool. And just even visualize like, here's my energetic boundaries, here's your energetic boundaries, here's where we have exchange, and to actually get to
Mm.
see it and like draw a field of light around. And I like to do some of those field attunements with my own energy field to just actually recognize like, are there any energies that I'm hosting in my being that aren't 100% my soul, like authentic soul essence? And can some of those like exit my field right now so that I can come into a new kind of relationship with that in order to be in a reciprocal and kind of attunement that feels consensual and like
For
and
sure.
and collaborative and attunement. And again, it's tricky because some of those things go on, but I think, yeah, baths, energetic fields. And then I like to make places, like you said, like, is there a place to put that? I love actually having little baskets for my different muses. Like I'll have
Love
like
it.
objects and like really specific altars or like corners of my house. And I'm just like, oh, this is like my rose barred altar, and this is my like water basket, and like here's a little place for my fairies album. It's like they have their little places to gather chi, and then I can tend to the chi of them there. And then if I feel overwhelmed or like just in my depths of something, I'll just ask for other kinds of support that are outside of the process. Can go ask elemental beings for support, or like put some of
Mm.
that down on an outdoor altar and be like, yo, we're gonna just like put some of this here right now and call in some of my own energetics to bring me back into
Mm.
to Marya land, and then come back to this from a different perspective where um I have attended to some of the mortal needs.
I love it. It's making me think of something I do where because I also have many altars and I also have lights that I allocate for different meanings. So when I turn the light on, I'm like, okay, upper world, y'all welcome here. But
I
it
love
makes me think of even with baskets, I could see like having a shawl or something that when you're like, okay, I'm gonna wrap this basket up for a moment. Like you're sleeping. Like I have definitely power items, and I'm like, and now you're sleeping, in that process of like almost like letting those energies rest as well. And then when you can open it up, like I love like I call it psychic soma, this relationship to the unseen world and also to our human physical realm, and how ritual is that conduit and that meeting place where our actions show our bodies what's like it, our spirit and our actions and our bodies get to commune through these intentional places. And I love that.
Mm.
Have you ever, I'm curious about at the end of like an agreement with a muse or with a creative process, when you've been tending it for so long. I know some of them maybe are really short marriages and some of them are long term slow burns, but
Uh-huh.
do you have anything you do to help kind of bundle up those energies?
Because there's ways that I will put both in my virtual reality, because I'll have different project folders. And then when things are done or they're in the complete, I'll move them to a different part of my, like literally just a different part of my desktop where they're in a resting place. I'm like, oh, this is archived. Like,
Yes.
this project is done. And so it doesn't actually live in my desktop in the same place as like
Mhm.
an open project anymore. And I've done that with a couple of different projects where I was just like, if I keep this on my desktop in this way, I'll keep getting invitations that I want to say yes to that relate to that. And I'm a no to that right now. Like I really did this very deliberately with my kids album project. People kept asking me to like come teach and do this and like do that, and like Crystal Kids is an awesome album and I love it, but I was like really specifically like, I'm gonna take a break from my music therapy work with children. I'm not gonna say yes to anything having to do with that right now. I'm not gonna keep tending the Crystal Kid muses. Like we have to wrap this up. And so I put it on a different part of my vision board in the museum place. Like this was the
Yes.
museum. And like if something's done or resting, I'll put it in my Rose Roots dreaming area. Like this is in the Rose Roots dreaming, like, but it's specifically hibernating because I'm not opening that up right now. So that I can really, so I visually see that, and then I'll
Mhm.
I'll arrange the costumes in my closet accordingly. I'll take
Love
things
it.
off the altar where they're closed. And so things can live in the museum if I still want to be like, oh yeah, that image that Lindy made for Crystal Kids, like it's up, but it's not leading or directing anything. And so those are some of the ways. There have been bigger ritual projects where I've had to make big giveaways to the land and bury ritual items and being like,
Uh-huh.
we are completely renegotiating the terms of our relationship. Like these big ritual objects that have been a big part of this prayer for the last few years, they are going back into the ground. Thank you so much.
Hmm.
Like all of the honey and milk and vodka that you want, like all of the crystals, like thank you, thank you for all the lessons and support. Woo! And so yeah, bigger giveaways are required for deeper pieces. And knowing that they come back knocking back sometime, it's not always a forever no. But I get to be at choice. I'm not at like I'm not in react like a responding to like this
Mhm.
urge of an open loop. I really do. I close loops with ritual, with physical objects, with rearranging my desktop, with rearranging my closet,
Yes.
rearranging all my altars, and then I'll do vocal alchemy meditations sometimes with really specific things like bigger creative processes. When I know they're done and they're dead, I'll do I'll sometimes do like a whole grief timeline, or like a grief
Mm.
harvest timeline where I like write out all of the positive moments of that whole experience, all of the hard lessons, all of the disappointments and the misses and the gaps, and I'll write a whole timeline top to bottom of what happened, of the highs and
Ooh.
lows, and I'll reflect on that so that I get to really take in the growth of the entire timeline. And then I'll do a meditation where I will collapse that whole experience into a spear and like bless it out of my field.
Mm. As you were talking, I had this image of, can I share the image I had of
Yeah.
your brother? I had this image of you with like all these guest rooms, like these gorgeous guest rooms, and they're all like allocated. And then like you'll have these muses or these these visions and projects come, and you like set up the guest room for them. But as a host, energetically, like you tend your guests really well. And so I had this image of, yeah, that process when we're creating a closure is really like, you've been a wonderful guest. It's time to like leave the guest room, and I'm going to clean out your guest room, and like we need to like clean, like let this be like a fresh slate for the next guest that was going to be unique and different and might not like, sausages and rosemary hanging everywhere or whatever.
I love that image. It reminds me of like an image that I had many years ago that I wrote about when I was entering into the relationship that I'm in now with my partner of 14 years. There was a way that I could tell that like some part of me um still had these like psychic altars set up for my previous relationships that I like hadn't like, and that like somehow like there was still like candles on some of them and like incense burning, and like I was still just like in appreciating and enjoying this, but I was like, oh, I have to take down these altars. Like this isn't like, these aren't altars that I'm going to continue tending in my heart anymore. And so I actually did like a whole visualization of breaking down all of these altars and like gratitude and bearing all the ritual objects from those places to like actually let those relationships fully go so I could tend to the one relationship that I was choosing.
Love it. It makes me think of this journey I did similarly, but through a journey through my womb and my canal and my vagina, where I literally like went through, like it was like a long corridor, a cave, and I had this big satchel, and I'm like, is there any objects here? And just like filling the satchel with like pieces of lovers past, or like, no, you can't keep that in here thing, and it was amazing, like psychically, like how much
Uh-huh.
discards and relics are like stored within us. And so I love this piece of, yeah, like this energetic hygiene, this creative energetic hygiene, so that we can have more spaciousness to let the fresh energy flow in while still honoring the lineage that has brought us to where we are.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. And it's like, it feels, because I'm such a sentimental person. I'm very sentimental.
Mm-hmm.
With all of the things that and I'm a collector. And so I collect memories and I collect little magical things. And so as a sentimental person that collects things with meaning, and I ascribe meaning to them, and there it is nice with creative projects and tending. I like you said, the guest rooms, like the different temple rooms of the Temple of the Muse. Um, I gotta deep clean those things sometimes to reset the energy, and it feels true in all of my little creative doors, and I have with creative projects really a ones that are sleeping, ones that are done and in the compost pile, ones that are in the Hall of Fame, in the museum, and they're exalted and we celebrate them. And there's ones that are like they died all the way. We're not exalted, we're letting them be dead, and it's okay.
Ashes gone.
They're like, these died and we had a funeral for them, and we're mulching that whole area, like it's getting renovated.
Love it.
And then there's ones that are like really active, and they're at the center of my thing. I have like a handful of projects that are at the center, and I will center them visually in my workspace. And then the ones that are periphery, I know they're happening. They're like, some of them are dreaming, some of them are gathering energy, some of them are like 2-3 years down the line, and they're on my open timeline, but they're open in a way that they're closed till these things are complete. So I feel decisive about the things that I keep open at a given time, and then when things I close. And it helps me to close things. Like I've had to learn to close things with people that I are holding open loops with me psychically and energetically in collaboration. Of if I'm working on a project and they're not giving me responses, and like we have a kind of open tending, like I'll tend with them, like, hey, I'm going to close this for now. We'll recheck in like 6 months or a year, or when these things have closed, so that we're not in a like reaching for each other kind of a way. Because sometimes
Mm.
I'll reach for people if we have an open loop and I can't hear
Yeah.
from them. that'll spin me. And so I've had to learn for myself to recognize I'm like, oh, I'm reaching for something that's not reaching back yet. And that's okay. The timing's not there. But then if I get to, when I communicate like, oh, I'm going to like pull my little my, what is it? My fibers back so I can have those.
Yeah.
That actually really helps me just to take care of my own energy. And then they're not hooked into my longing or,
Oh,
stress.
yeah.
Oh, like where are, like
Well, this is a perfect segue before we close with what's open for enrollment. So, for those of you that are watching until it's the 28th, February 28th, oh, it's Valentine's, y'all, today, by the way, 2024. On February 28th, Marya is going to be embarking with students from all around the world, and maybe you will be one of them. Do you want to talk about Courting the Muse, the waitlist sessions?
Yeah, Courting the Muse is a series that I started after I released the album Sapphire. And I did a 7-week course on songwriting and creative process and tending a muse because that was a big muse and a big thematic body of work. And so I wanted to speak about building a thematic body of work and getting into the creative process. And it was so much fun. And so this season, I just released the album Waitlist back in the fall. God, it's been 6 months now, actually, which is crazy to me. But we are embarking in a similar echo of what we did with Sapphire sessions and then waitlist sessions. So we'll be in creative process, creative writing. So this will be good for writers of any kind. I'll be working through the lens of songwriting, but it's great for creatives of all types who just want to get into thinking about creative process from new lenses and new angles of inspiration. I'll also be talking about all of the stages of the creative process, from inception to sustaining energy to finishing something to celebrating it, all of these cycles that actually help fortify the creative process in a way that also completes things well. And this season is really special because I did a bunch of videos with Andy Zenzak at Gadgetbox Studios where we recorded Waitlist, and he and I did a bunch of interview stuff and how we workshop things together. And he is just a gem of resource and an excellent teacher. He's been one of my main mentors in production. So this season has a bunch of archival documentation of our process, and it's going to be really beautiful. So there's all this bonus material plus 6 live creative writing sessions and lectures where I'll break down songs and go into all kinds of stuff. So we start February 28th, and it's all archived. So if you are hearing this after the period's done, it'll be available for replay and self-study, as is Sapphire Sessions. And actually, I'm doing a bundle this season of the full package of all of the previous Courting the Muse cataloged works, plus this one that's going to be happening live in a cohort. So that is what I'm most excited about right now. And it's just 2 weeks from today.
Oh, brilliant. I love the idea of having an opportunity to digest and for yourself, also the process of teaching and learning through this whole massive experience that you've probably had to do a lot internally, and getting to actually share that and turn it into a learning experience. It's what a great further integration also for yourself. I can
It is
imagine.
an integration.
Oh,
It is. It really is. It's one of my favorite things to do, and it's something that's part of my design. I love going through process and then distilling it and talking about it. It does feel like part of um how I close certain kinds of loops.
and then
Yeah.
the last thing was Marya, for any of you guys that are listening to, I'll have the links in the show notes, has offered the PRISM Workbook, which is a 33-day guidebook for cultivation of creativity and wonder. I personally did this when you're doing it live. It was so much fun. I did it with my daughter. She was maybe 10. I don't know if it was a couple years ago. So it's just a really great way of augmenting if you have a daily writing practice or if you want to create one. Like the prompts are spectacular. So do sign up for that and add that to your daily routine if you feel called. And with that, as we opened, I want to close properly. And so I want to just feeling the stirring of the words and the ideas and the visions and the memories that we ushered forth in our conversation. We thank you for the inspiration that you've given us, and may you ripple through to those that are seeking your medicine. Putting our hands on our bodies, feeling the great within. Thank you, great within. Thank you for being a place that we can feel and hear and see and taste and touch and move forward from. I want to thank the great beyond. Thank you for your expansiveness, your curiosity and wonder that you let us just touch and taste and sip into this conversation. Thank you, great beyond, for being with us. Hail and farewell. And lastly, that sweet, sweet old earth, that pulsing life force, that foundation that is the great beneath. May you compost that which is ready to be digested from this conversation. If there's any energies that have been stirred up through the listeners or ourselves that would like to just return to the earth in a deep, saturating way, I thank you, great beneath, for being that sweet, sweet returning presence. I thank the Rattlesnake Creek for flowing these words, finding the moisture and the hydration to the dry parts of ourselves. I thank you, Gary Oaks and Cedar, for where I am. And I thank you, golden, golden dragon, who've been soaring around us, making its loops. Thank you for moving the energy between me and Marya for today's Spirit and Bone podcast. Blessed be.
Thank you so much. This was so fun.